Hello fellows, and welcome to episode 14b of Sonnet Sisters. I'm Jennifer, and in this episode I'll be going through an analysis of Shakespeare's sonnet number 14. Oh, hey, remember in 14a when I said that this poem doesn't actually make any reference to kids? You know what, it's interesting, this is still part of the Procreation sonnet sequence, but it hasn't mentioned kids. Guess who was wrong? Yay! Oh my gosh! You didn't mention kids. You didn't mention kids. Yep, it was me. Of course, this sonnet has a reference to having kids because it is a Procreation sonnet in the Fair Lord sequence. Now, the first time that I reread this poem after having put it down from the blind reading, the very next time that I picked this poem up and read it through to myself to try and work out what was going on, I could see the kids-related line staring me in the face. And which line was it? And then I wasn't sure about this next line. If from thyself to store thou wouldst convert. Yep, boom, baby. It's the one I didn't understand. The thing that tripped me up with that line was the syntax, and this is often what gets me. In this poem, there's only two words that I didn't actually fully understand, and one of them I could work out from context, but I'm going to come to those later. So the place that I was struggling, or the thing that I was struggling with, was just the syntax, the way that the words were strung together. So in that line, if from thyself to store thou wouldst convert, the words were in an order that didn't make sense to my brain, and it's not the way that we generally speak. So all I had to do in my head was kind of shuffle those words around so that I got instead, if thou wouldst convert from thyself to store. And then it made sense, and I was like, oh. So if we take it from the line before, if we take it from line 11, then we have, as truth and beauty shall together thrive, if from thyself to store thou wouldst convert. So it's just saying that truth and beauty, which is like truth being an internal good quality and beauty being an external good quality, and those are things that the subject has, both of those things. So truth and beauty would both thrive and continue to live on if you converted them from living inside yourself to being put into storage. Within a woman's womb, or within a child, basically, is where you're storing those things. So that was the reference to kids. There was another line in here, actually, which tripped me up with the syntax, although it was a little bit easier to work out than that last line, than line number 12. It was line number 5. Nor can I fortune 2 brief minutes tell. It's sort of, because when you hear the first bit of that sentence, nor can I fortune, you sort of think, well, fortune is not a verb. How do I fortune something? But it's just sort of mixed up. So if you move the words around a bit, then you get, nor can I tell the fortune to brief minutes. So I can't tell the fortune of 1 minute to the next minute to the next minute. So that's a good thing to do. If you're finding that you understand every individual word in a line, but you've no idea how it makes sense, just try shifting them around a bit, moving the words around, and see if it does then make a sentence that makes more sense to you, because that's probably what's going on, and Shakespeare's just put it together in a way that you're not expecting. So yeah, this poem does mention kids in just one line. Sneaky but potent, like a terrible fart, but poetic. I'm just briefly going to talk about the two words within this sonnet that I didn't fully understand when I read it through the first time. They are dearth and prognosticate, both of which I have checked the pronunciation on, and that is correct. Unlike my last sonnet, sonnet number 12, where I did not check the pronunciation of B-I-E-R, which I was pronouncing beer, which actually should have been beer, like the drink, which then makes the line that it was in, born on the byre with born and bristly beard, which is what I said, it makes it born on the beer with white and bristly beard, which sounds so much cooler and more deliberate, and you can understand why he used those words, and it just sounds cool rolling off your tongue. But I didn't do that last week, so apologies if you noticed that before and were like, she's saying it wrong. Yeah, I realise that now. Sorry, but I have done it correctly this time. So we have dearth in line 4, not to be confused with death, because you could easily think that it was just another way of spelling death at the time. No, no, no. A dearth is like a shortage of something, like a drought or a crop failure, that sort of thing. And prognosticate in line 13, which is really fun to say. It's just another way of saying prediction or telling the future, telling the fortune, that sort of thing, which makes sense with the context of the rest of the lines around it and with the rest of the poem. So those are those two words. Now, something that is really useful to do when you're trying to boil down the essence of what's going on in a sonnet, or indeed in a speech from one of Shakespeare's plays, is to take it and really condense it down to just the necessary words and get it as small and compact as you possibly can. And that really helps you to find the meaning of what is actually being said. So I've done this with sonnet number 14, and this is what I've got. Not from the stars do I my judgment pluck, but from thine eyes my knowledge I derive. Truth and beauty shall thrive, if thyself to store thou convert, or else thy end is truth's and beauty's doom. And that makes it very clear what's going on. I don't take my ideas about you, I don't take my judgment from the stars, I take them from your eyes. That's where I can really see things truly. And truth and beauty will live on if you convert yourself into storage. Otherwise, truth and beauty will die when you do and be doomed forever. That's it, done. In just 5 lines, I can sum up the entire poem. And it's really useful because then you start to say, hang on a minute. So from the first 2 lines I said there, not from the stars do I my judgment pluck, and but from thine eyes my knowledge I derive. That makes total sense. I don't take it from here, I take it from here. The first line is line 1, and the second line is actually line 9. So there are 7 lines in between those 2 points being made, in between those 2 sentences. So you think, hang on, what on earth is going on in the rest of those 7 lines from, I don't take it from this, blah, 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 7 lines, I take it from this. And he's just riffing. That's what he's doing in those 8 lines. In the first octave of this sonnet, he's just riffing on the idea of astrology. He says astronomy in here. That was something I want to pick up on. Astronomy to us is the actual science of looking at the stars, whereas astrology is like star signs and stuff like that and telling your future. But back then, the science of the stars wasn't as good as it is today, and it was seen basically as the same thing as astrology. So when he says, and yet methinks I have astronomy, he's talking about astrology in this context of telling the future and star signs and that sort of stuff. So yeah, he's just kind of riffing on this idea of what it means to tell the fortune. How else can I say telling the fortune? How else can I say predicting the future? That's what's going on, which then helps you in terms of, if you're going to say this out loud, the kind of tone that you're going to use, because he's basically just listing and having fun with going into the various ways that you can phrase this and the various different images that you can use when talking about predicting somebody's future. So he's just kind of having fun in those 7 lines in between, basically, which is really cool. And the bit that I like most from his riffing is in line 6, pointing to each his thunder, wind and rain, because it was talking about the brief minutes as well. So it's like telling each minute, you're going to rain at 6:01, there's going to be wind at 22:09. You know, that's the kind of precise idea. That's just the image that I get in my head. I really like the idea that each minute is getting told, and he's personified the minutes as well, saying to each his thunder, wind and rain, which also obviously is a metaphor to people. I suppose a person could be a brief minute in terms of the vastness of the universe. All of our lives are just like that. So it's telling each minute and telling each person you're going to have turbulent times, you're going to have a lovely sunny day, you're going to have a good time at this point in your life. So that's one of my favourite lines within his riffing. The last thing that I want to mention is, surprise, surprise, the Iambic pentameter. I've talked before about how this can help you to land on the words that you really need to land on and to help you draw out the understanding from a sonnet of what's actually going on and what's important within it. When I first read through this poem in the blind reading on Monday, I kind of rolled over the word constant in line 10, in the line, and constant stars, in them I read such art. I just kind of said it like that. I let all the words just kind of roll off each other. But as soon as I started underlining where the stress falls in each line, I found that constant came out much stronger. So when I really put emphasis on it, it comes out, and constant stars, in them I read such art. So the words that really ping out are constant, stars, them, and art. Read as well, but because of where it sits in the line, it's not as prominent. So constant stars, the fact that it really lands on that, and that's the first beat of that line, really brings out the fact that it's insinuating that you are constant and you are trustworthy in comparison to other stars which are moving around the sky constantly. And there was an idea at the time of moving stars compared to constant stars. I suppose something like the North Star maybe would be considered a constant star because it always points north and you can trust it, it's reliable, it's always in the same place in the sky, in that it's always pointing towards north, as opposed to certain constellations which move across the sky throughout the year and things like that. So there's this idea of moving stars, which is implied, but you're a constant star, and that word constant pings out as being important. That's what gave me the idea that the subject is being talked of as if they are reliable and trustworthy. And in them, I read such art. So again, this really supports the idea that's been going on throughout the whole poem of it's not any of this nonsense, it's you, it's your eyes. So again, the fact that the line lands on the word them is saying that is where the truth lies for me, that is where I can derive my knowledge. And then to finish the line off on the word art, and constant stars, in them I read such art. That's a really lovely word to say. He's basically saying, yeah, I can see the truth, or I can see the future. That's where I can predict what's happening. But to use the word art it holds so much weight to it, so much positive weight, that it's beautiful and necessary and wonderful and something that touches your soul, I guess. That's what I say with art. It's very different to just fact, because he could have said something along the lines of, in constant stars, in them I read the truth, or in them I read such facts, something like that. But he's chosen the word art because it has a much more romantic feel to it. So there is, again, it started to creep in the last few sonnets, and here again it's really getting solidified, this idea of the positive relationship happening between Shakespeare and the subject, the person he's writing the sonnets for. Saying, in your eyes, comparing someone's eyes to stars, that's one of the most romantic things you can do. Saying, your eyes are like constant stars, and in them I read such art. And then he only had one little line about, put yourself into storage so that you don't end up doomed for the rest of your days. And that truth and beauty, that idea as well, that truth and beauty die with you, that's a huge statement to make. That's saying that this person is the ultimate carrier of truth and beauty. So yeah, I think Shakespeare likes this guy in whatever way. He certainly thinks highly of him. So, all that in mind, when it comes to performance, I'm just going to keep it quite simple with this one. And I really want to push forward that idea of the astrology, but astrology not being what's important, that a person is important. So I'm going to draw that in somehow, maybe have a character who is a fortune teller or something like that. I don't want to give too much away right now, but I'm going to keep it fairly simple for this one. I think just have two people talking and one person telling the other that they are great. That's basically what's going on here. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on sonnet number 14, and you can see my performance of this sonnet on Saturday in episode 14C. Until then, fare thee well.
What was he on about? That body mister, come figure it out with the Sonnet Sisters.
So there are 7 lines in between. 7, 8. So, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, in between, there's 7.